Maureen O'Hara, a name that once forced Hollywood to adjust its lighting the moment she stepped into the frame. With blazing red hair, icy blue eyes, and a kind of beauty that seemed to drink in color rather than reflect it, she became exactly what the Technicolor era was hungry for. On screen, Maureen O'Hara represented strength without apology. She stood shoulder to shoulder with the most dominant men of classic Hollywood, never hovering at the margins of the story, never waiting to be rescued. Her presence placed her squarely at the center of every frame, not because she demanded it, but because she could not be ignored. Yet what audiences saw under those powerful lights was only the visible surface. Behind the glowing images lived a far more complex reality. O'Hara was shaped by discipline long before she encountered fame. She entered Hollywood surrounded by oversized egos and learned quickly that beauty was never protection. In an industry that rewarded compliance from women, she chose endurance instead. That choice cost her opportunities, silenced her at key moments, and slowly pushed her out of favor. She was never meant to be a muse. She was born with an instinct for self-respect that functioned like survival reflex. Again and again, she learned how to stay upright on narrow ground, balancing passion with restraint, love with danger, fame with personal safety. She did not turn suffering into legend or trade pain for attention. Instead, she withdrew, restarted, and rebuilt whenever the cost of staying became too high. More than half a century later, Maureen O'Hara is still remembered as the Queen of Technicolor, the most radiant woman of a radiant era. But behind the title was a living, breathing person. A woman who loved deeply, endured quietly, raised her child largely alone, and repeatedly chose to walk away from glory when it demanded too much. Which leaves one lingering question: was the brilliance of fame ever enough to warm someone who spent her entire life learning how to protect herself in the dark? Maureen O'Hara was born on August 17, 1920, in Ranelagh, a southern suburb of Dublin. She was the second of 6 children born to Charles Fitzsimons and Marguerite Fitzsimons. The family lived comfortably but modestly, guided not by luxury but by structure. Daily life revolved around order, restraint, and discipline. Her father ran a sporting goods business and later became involved in football administration with Shamrock Rovers. To him, sport was about endurance and training, not applause. Her mother, a classically trained operatic singer, filled the house with music, but never performance. Practice happened daily, always at fixed hours, always focused on precision. All 6 children were exposed early to the arts. Several pursued careers in acting and production, while the eldest sister, Peggy, chose a religious path. But within the Fitzsimons household, stardom simply did not exist as a concept. Art was treated like mathematics or language, a discipline, not a dream. Talent was not celebrated early, and creativity was encouraged without indulgence. That environment shaped O'Hara permanently. At 6 years old, Maureen began formal training in dance and drama. It was rigid and repetitive, focused on control, memory, and physical discipline. At 14, she appeared on stage with local theater groups, not as a discovery moment, but as the next logical step in training. There was no thrill in applause. Performance felt like a shift of work, governed by expectations. When she entered the Abbey Theatre, the standards only sharpened. Emotion did not excuse mistakes. Favoritism did not exist. One stood on stage because one could stand there. Alongside performance, her father insisted she learn typing and bookkeeping, not as a backup plan, but as protection against dependence. Performance, he believed, was unstable. That lesson was never explained. It was simply lived. By her late teens, O'Hara's life ran on routine, school by day, stage by night. There was no space for self-importance. When she moved to London in the late 1930s, she approached film as a technical experiment. Small roles, screen tests, cold studios. The camera offered no feedback. Film was not yet destiny. That changed when Charles Laughton noticed her. Not for glamour, but for steadiness. He signed her to a 7-year contract, placing her firmly on a cinematic path. Around the same time, Fitzsimons became O'Hara, a subtle change that marked the first moment her identity was reshaped for the market. In 1939, Jamaica introduced her to film rhythm. That same year, The Hunchback of Notre Dame transformed her trajectory. As Esmeralda, she stood between visual spectacle and tragic weight. The film's success brought immediate consequences. RKO acquired her contract, positioning her as a long-term Technicolor star. From that point forward, she was no longer transitioning into film. She was being molded by it. In 1941, How Green Was My Valley demanded restraint rather than spectacle. Under John Ford's strict direction, emotion was compressed, not released. O'Hara adjusted, abandoning stage habits for precision within the frame. The film won 5 Academy Awards. She received no individual nomination, yet her character became essential to the film's emotional architecture. As Technicolor intensified, so did physical demands. O'Hara endured brutal shooting conditions, rocking ships, harsh sun, exhausting schedules. Fatigue never appeared on screen, but it shaped every production. Films like The Spanish Main and Sinbad the Sailor solidified her image as a strong woman not through declaration, but necessity. Without strength, the roles collapsed. In 1949, at the height of her career, an off-screen incident changed everything. According to her memoir, "'Tis Herself," O'Hara was sexually assaulted by a powerful producer. She reported it. The industry responded not with accountability, but suspicion. The press questioned her character. Roles quietly disappeared. She was not expelled, she was slowed. Decades later, her story would be recognized for what it was, not scandal, but truth spoken too early. Despite continued success in films like Against All Flags, O'Hara increasingly refused roles that reduced Irish women to caricatures. Studios labeled her difficult. Saying no became risky. Yet she held her ground. Her collaborations with John Ford and John Wayne defined another chapter. Films like Rio Grande, McLintock, and Big Jake became box office staples. Though audiences imagined romance, their relationship remained rooted in mutual respect. That dynamic reached its peak in The Quiet Man, filmed in Ireland. The production demanded physical endurance. During one scene, O'Hara broke her hand. Filming continued. The film won 2 Academy Awards and became inseparable from her legacy. Afterward, she quietly stepped away from that trajectory. There was no announcement. Just absence. In the 1960s, The Parent Trap introduced her to a new generation. She played stability rather than spectacle. The film was a success, but it did not restart her career. Instead, it confirmed something else: she had never disappeared. As Hollywood narrowed opportunities for older women, O'Hara shifted naturally toward television and music. She returned to Irish folk songs, recorded with restraint, preserving tradition rather than packaging it. Music allowed discipline without image. In 2014, at age 94, she received an honorary Oscar. She spoke one sentence: "This is very meaningful to me." No revision of history. No emotional crescendo. Her private life revealed equal resilience. Early marriages failed. One relationship became dangerous. Pregnancy clarified her limits. She left, raising her daughter alone. Later, she found partnership with Charles Blair, an aviator outside Hollywood's orbit. Their life in the Virgin Islands offered balance until his sudden death in 1978. O'Hara took over the airline, confronting legal and financial pressures without retreat. In her final years, she lived quietly, first in Ireland, then Idaho. Routine replaced recognition. On October 24, 2015, Maureen O'Hara passed away in her sleep at 95, laid to rest beside her husband at Arlington National Cemetery. Across more than 60 films, her legacy is not spectacle, but structure. She proved women could exist at the core of cinema without exception or apology. The honorary Oscar arrived late, but it confirmed what had always been true. Some careers do not need constant light to endure. Maureen O'Hara did not cling to fame. She stepped away when the work no longer required her presence. And in that quiet space, her place in film history became undeniable, not as an icon, but as the ground itself, firm enough for others to stand on.